It's hard to believe that Mercedes-Benz has only been producing EVs for a couple of years now because they've already got some great options on the market. Options like the EQE sedan. But now it's already time for that car's SUV cousin, aptly named the EQE SUV. As you can see, it's a little bit taller and maybe a little bit more rugged too. But does it deliver the same electric smooth and style that we've got from before and all the performance too? That's what we're here in Lisbon to find out. But before we do that, let's dig a little bit deeper on the design. Now, I love a lot of things about the EQE sedan, but one thing that I don't like is the way it looks. It's very blob-shaped, kind of anonymous, of course, in the pursuit of aerodynamics to give you as much range as you can get out of a given charge on the battery, but it resulted in a car that just doesn't really stand out in a parking lot. Surprisingly, the EQE SUV, despite looking very similar, of course, I think it actually looks a lot better. This body shape, I think, is much more accommodating to that aerodynamic shape. This is a little bit less aerodynamic than the sedan, but overall, I think it's a much better looking car. That's helped by this one being the AMG model, which means we've got some better looking wheels here, a little bit more aggressive front fascia, and some other details on the inside that we'll take a look at once we hit the road. There are three flavors of the EQE SUV, offering progressively more power and more driven wheels, but of course, coming at an ever greater price and lower range. On the lowest end is the EQE SUV 350 Plus, a single-motor rear-wheel drive model with 215 kilowatts of power and 565 newton-meters of torque. Step up to the 350 4MATIC, which adds all-wheel drive via a second motor up front, and you're still looking at 215 kilowatts, but now a more substantial 765 newton-meters. Finally, there's the top-shelf EQE500 4MATIC with 300 kilowatts and 858 newton-meters of torque. As power goes up, range predictably goes down, since all these models use the same 90.6 kilowatt-hour battery pack sandwiched into the floor of the vehicle. On the high end, the 350 Plus is said to do upwards of 596 kilometers on the WLTP range test cycle, but on the low end, the 500 4MATIC will max out at 552. Compare that to the maximum 654 kilometers of range on the EQE350 Plus sedan, and you can see the penalty that extra bulk in the back of the SUV brings to the party. So what is the EQE SUV like to drive? Well, for better or worse, it's more or less just like the EQE sedan. I think in my book that's a good thing. The EQE sedan, though not exactly a performance car by any means, is fun to drive, but more importantly, it's comfortable, it's refined, it's relaxed. It feels like everything that you would want a luxurious electric sedan to be, and very much that continues here with the SUV. It's a little bit taller, of course, so I've got a little bit better visibility ahead of me. But the handling characteristics, the acceleration characteristics, and the overall vibe of the car, frankly, is again very much the same as the EQE sedan. This feels, again, like I would want a luxurious SUV to feel. I've got good ride quality. It's very good over some of the broken pavement we've been driving over here in Portugal. I've even driven over a little bit of off-roading, roughly, just to get to a photo location, and it did just fine. I could raise the suspension with air suspension. Right now, though, we're in a lower spec car. I've driven everything from the base 350 Plus, which I'm in right now, all the way up to the 500 with active air suspension and everything else. And honestly, if I had to choose between the two, I'd probably go more toward the low end, either the 350 Plus, the rear-wheel drive model that I'm in right now, or the 350 4MATIC, which is also an option. Both cost the same, impressively. The 500 does give you more power, and of course you can option up things like rear steering if you want it to give a little bit more nimble handling, and probably more importantly, you can do a U-turn on the dime and those sorts of things. But again, I think the sweetest spot for this car is more on the lower end. You don't really need the extra power with the 500. This is not a sports car by any means. And it's got plenty of torque, and it accelerates quite well even in this lower spec model. But if you do go with the all-wheel drive model, they've got an interesting innovation that's debuting here in the EQE SUV first, and that's the ability to disconnect the front motor from the drivetrain. Effectively, there's a clutch that takes both of the drive shafts and disconnects them physically from the electric motor. So basically, it makes it as if it's a rear-wheel drive car. Now, we've seen sports cars do that in the past to give you more drifting and that kind of thing. Here, though, it's done for efficiency. So if you are just driving down the road normally and just kind of cruising and coasting, it will disconnect that to basically get rid of the sort of parasitic losses that you'd get from having two electric motors instead of one. But when you want higher regeneration or when you want greater acceleration, it can then re-engage that front motor to give you more power under acceleration or more power under regeneration, which means more electricity going back into the battery. With the higher end 500 with the AMG trim, you do get some nicer things in the interior. For example, there's a bit of a sexier steering wheel than I have here in the base model. Some other little bits of trim in the car too that are missing from the higher end model. But this is still a very comfortable interior and certainly a little bit more roomy, I think, than the EQE. One of the other complaints I have about the EQE sedan is that it feels a little bit cramped inside, a little bit claustrophobic. With the EQE SUV, things are a little bit open, a little bit more airy. With the 500, the higher shelf model, you can get a panoramic sunroof, which is absent on this model. But with or without that, there's great visibility all around and plenty of headroom at the front and, more importantly, at the rear. Getting into the back seat of the EQE sedan can be a little bit of a challenge. No problem at all here. And of course, the seats fold down. You've got plenty of cargo space out back. Now you can option out the full Hyperscreen experience if you want all the displays inside your car, which will give you a widescreen display here in the middle, the fully configurable gauge cluster behind the steering wheel, and a third display that sits in front of the passenger there, through which you can even stream high-definition movies if you want to. And in fact, there's an infrared camera here built into the gauge cluster that's watching my eyes. It's really there to make sure I'm watching the road, but if it detects that I'm looking over at that display and watching the movie that my passenger is watching, it'll actually pause the movie and eventually just turn the display off if I keep lingering over there, which is a nice safety feature. But in this car, again, we're in more of a base model, a lower cost edition, which just has the normal vertically oriented display, which in my eye is plenty. This is still a really large display, and Mercedes-Benz has done a really good job of toning down the user interface, making it easy to get to all the options and configurability here. And there's a lot of options and configurability without making it overwhelming with a ton of menus and things that you need to dig through. On the gauge cluster, I've got 5 or 6 different gauge cluster displays that I can go through. A classic display, there's a sport display with a little UFO G-meter thing, which is kind of fun. And I've even got an understated mode if I want to just keep things as simple as possible. And then over here, I've got a full screen navigation, of course, plus infotainment and all the other good stuff that you could want. Again, it's all layered on top of each other, a lot of transparency going on here. Nice and easy to use, a lot of power without being too overwhelming. As far as safety features go, we've got adaptive cruise control and all the other assistance systems that you'd expect in a modern high-end car. Automatic lane keeping, emergency braking. We've got a full 360 camera available here as well with automatic parking. And even if you go into off-road mode, you can get some advanced camera views there too to help make sure that you are positioning your car appropriately. All those things, of course, will be some options that you can add on if you want to, but at least the advanced safety systems are standard on every EQE SUV, which will make it a very nice and safe car to be in. At the end of the day, driving in the beautiful Portuguese sun, I'm surprised at how much I like the EQE SUV. Not surprised because I expected to dislike it. I'm just surprised at how much more I like it than the sedan. The sedan is already a great car, but this, with the slightly more attractive shape, the greater practicality that an SUV offers, but still offering the same driving dynamics, the same comfort, the same luxuries as the sedan, it seems like the complete package. About the only thing that you're giving up is a little bit of range, and that is unfortunate, but I guess you just can't have everything, can you?